Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. I'm Annette Richmond, and this is the Smarter Career and Business Move Show. And, I'm so excited to have you here with me today, Linda. I think we met on LinkedIn. I'm not exactly sure how. I know we've been on the stage together most recently at Deanna Russo's. Um, LinkedIn, her mastery, LinkedIn mastery show.
We
And
did.
so I'm really excited to have you with me. Now, for anyone who does not know you, please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm a career coach, and I got to this by a roundabout way. I started out in HR kind of by accident, but I've done everything in HR from being an HR business partner to an employment manager. I've been an internal recruiter, a headhunter, and managed talent acquisition. But for the last 6 years, I've actually been doing job search coaching on a dedicated basis. And I'm excited to bring information from all sides of that hiring desk to the recruiting and the job search process.
Yeah, that really does give you and your clients by extension an edge when you are able to, see it. You've seen it from the other side. I did some recruiting myself, and it really does help just even to understand the whole idea that, the hiring manager is not on the same wavelength as the job seeker. For the job seeker, it's like, okay, I want the job. Let's get moving and get me
Right.
the job. And the hiring manager is like, well, I have my job to do, and this is just like I'm doing this too. So it
Yep.
really having that background really helps your clients, I'm sure. So let's jump right into it because we're talking today about a forever job. And I double checked this because I kind of familiar with this figure, I'm sure you are too, that the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that we all hold about 13 jobs in our career. And I think it's 12.7, but it's about 13 jobs. But they say that half of them are between sort of 18 and 24, which makes me think they're part-time jobs,
Right.
internships, maybe a couple of, early jobs. So can you clarify what you mean by a forever job?
Certainly. And you notice that I say next forever job because I no longer believe in forever jobs.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The reason for that is that many of us, when we started out in our careers, thought we were going to start with one company and we would stay there for the rest of our career, right? From hire to retirement. That's not happening anymore. Both because companies don't value that anymore, and the work that we do within companies, it can be gone in an instant. But it's
Hmm.
also because many of us have decided that in order to really continue to grow, going from one company to another really helps that process. So when
Hmm.
I talk about next forever job, it's the job you really love and you really want, and you want to stay there until you decide it's not right for you.
Yes, that's true. And I love that description. The last person that I know who had stayed with one company was my dad, and he
Yeah.
he stayed there and he even got early retirement when the company consolidated, et cetera. But it just doesn't happen anymore. And companies do not have, for the most part, unless you're working for the state or something, you don't have retirement and all of that like they used to. And, I love what you said because one of my favorite jobs was working for a magazine as a writer and editor, and it was my dream job. It was something that I always wanted. I went back to school and whatever, and I loved it until I decided, what, I want to try something different. And so I went back to school and moved into a different field. So, what do you think? Are I well, no. What can you say? What can you share with the audience? Sort of maybe three hurdles, the biggest hurdles that people encounter when they are looking for their next forever job or next forever career, even.
Right. So, and I love the fact that you used both career and job, because I think that when you were using your Bureau of Labor Statistics example initially, one of the things you didn't mention is that BLS also says that people actually change career direction up to
Mhm.
7 times during the course of their lifetime, their working careers. So it's not just changing companies or changing titles and what you're doing, it's actually changing direction. And the idea of the three things that I would look at for whether you're changing direction or you're changing jobs, you're changing
Mm-hmm.
careers, you need to understand what it is that's really important to you. So one of the things that I work with people on is determining what do they really like doing, the tasks, and what do they not like doing, because that's important. Because you're going to look for that next career or that next job that incorporates more of the like to do and fewer of the less, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in addition, one of the things that's really important when you're changing jobs or changing careers is you want to be able to find those transferable skills, those transferable accomplishments. So you look at job postings and you decide, or whatever's going on within a company, what are the things that you do best that this company is really looking for?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you leverage them for that new opportunity?
Yeah, I love that you talked about it in that way, the idea of more of the like to do, because there are always things in the job that you don't like to do. For in my dream job, we used to do cover shoots for the magazines, and we'd have a professional photographer come in, and sometimes we do have a lot of products come in, and I got to work with the photographer, and it was fabulous. But also at the end, I was the one that had to box up all the products and type on a typewriter labels and ship all this stuff, which was not so fun. So I like that you mentioned that, it's not all rosy. No job is as dreamy as you think it actually is going to be. And you know, one of the things I think of with transferable skills, because I was kind of in the career field a bit when I was going from working in accounting, which is and I was doing some editing when I was moving, changing positions. And one of the things that I highlighted when I was going from even being a magazine writer to going to work in vocation as a vocational counselor is I was highlighting my interviewing skills, because that was part of the work
Mhm.
for the next job. And I was highlighting my ability to write, because part of that, my job was going to be writing reports and things. And so how can people, come up with these things? And is it helpful to maybe also think of the things that I don't like to do and make a list of those? Because sometimes I think it's easier.
Absolutely. And I like that idea of making the list both ways. The and I really encourage people to come up with what do you don't like to do? I mean, for me, it's all the filing stuff. You should look at my desk. No, don't look at my desk. But in any event, the idea is knowing that what you like and what you don't like, making those lists is really important. In fact, I encourage people for the things that you like to do, actually use those as search terms when you're trying to find the next job. It's not just about titles, because
Hmm.
titles are so different from company to company. So if you're searching for jobs on the posting boards, and LinkedIn is really good about this, put in a Boolean search with a couple of the terms, a couple of those areas that you really like to do, and
Hmm.
see what pops up.
So that's kind of the reverse, because that's what recruiters do. They put in the terms of the skills that they're looking for candidates. So you're doing it in reverse as the job seeker. You're looking for the skills within the job descriptions. What a great idea! I never thought about that. That is really really smart thinking there. So you know what do you have quite a record of client successes, clients that you work with getting offers. And what would you say is kind of behind that? Now, for me, in my experience, a lot of people, their success, whether they're in a career or they're an entrepreneur or whatever, comes after they learn to sort of shift their mindset, going from, if you're looking for a job, thinking of it as, your resume is not your employment history, but a marketing
Mhm.
document. If you're someone like me, starting to look at things like, okay, looking at it from a business perspective with the things you're doing. So is that part of what you do with your clients to help them shift their mindset? And if so, how?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things that I tell my clients is that to some extent, even though it feels like you have no control, you do have the ultimate control. And what I want them to do is hire their next employer. So it's not just about getting a job. It's about where do you want to be and what do you want to do next? And more importantly, where do you want to do it? With whom do you want to work?
Mm-hmm.
So that mindset set shift, Annette, is really important. It's focusing in on the things you want to do and remembering to take it out of the past, the history. Here's what I used to do.
Mm-hmm.
Here's who I used to work for, and putting it in the new company's terms. One of the things we found is that companies don't care about everything you've ever done. They only care about what you can do for them.
Of course, they're listening to what station WIIFM. What's in it for me? Like we all are when we're spending our time. If I'm watching a webinar, what am I going to get for my hour? Am I going to get something? And my experience as a job seeker, because I worked in various positions before I went on had my own business, is that employers treat you the best when they're courting you.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the worst jobs actually, two of the worst jobs I ever had. One was I was trying to get into advertising, and the hiring manager was late. He was not very courteous to me, but I wanted to get into it so badly that I took the job when they offered it to me, even though my gut was saying no, no, no. So what do you recommend for people who find themselves in that kind of position where either they're interviewing and it doesn't feel right to them, or perhaps it's something where they feel like the company is kind of just not what, or the job not what it appears to be? How can they sort of ferret that out ahead of time?
So it's more difficult, but I'm a big believer in listening to your gut. And if you're at all concerned, you ask the same questions about company culture or how people work, and you listen for those answers in every interview.
Mm-hmm.
And you try and then compare those. But I also believe that you can go out and use LinkedIn as your tool and find some people who either work there now or better yet, who used to.
Mm-hmm.
And then do a quick little informational interview with them and find out how things work. But Annette, when you say your gut isn't feeling right, I see Sue in the room. Sue Griffey says, she's the mentor with pom-poms. I would use those virtual pom-poms and congratulate anybody who walks away from an interview, walks away from an offer because it doesn't feel right. It takes courage, but ultimately you're the one who has to do the job and work in that area.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. And it's funny. I was just watching a movie last night, a bit of a movie, and one of a woman says she's actually in a cab, and she's talking to the cab driver who she kind of knows, and she says, "Well, what do you do when you have a difficult decision to make? How do you do that?" And he said, "Well, I don't really see it that way, because when you flip a coin, you know which way you want it to land." And so I guess that's kind of, and that really stuck with me, because I think that that's true. We often, we're trying to decide this or that, and but maybe that is the thing to when they say flip a coin, because when you flip a coin, it really tells you what you want.
It does. And the other thing that you can do is if you're a little more analytical or you're concerned about it, make a list of pros and cons. What is it about this particular job, this company, this offer, this person that you feel really good about? What
Mm-hmm.
works for you? And then what things don't. And as you're putting them on paper, sometimes that helps to clarify the issue directly for you.
Yeah, I like that. And one of the things that I learned, because my first job in sort of the career field was working as a vocational counselor, and one of the things that they taught us, which I like too, is they called it like the criteria method. And so you would have like your 5 top things that you want. Maybe one of them is money. Maybe one of them is working from home occasionally. Maybe one of them is, paid time off or something. And you put your criteria down. And then when we're looking at your jobs, you're checking them off the criteria. So maybe it's worth it to make $10,000 less. I mean, if we're talking that, 10,000 is just a small percentage, to make that less if you're getting more sort of paid time off.
Absolutely. And when people are actually starting to evaluate what kind of jobs they're looking for, my advice is to take the money, if you can, off the
Mm-hmm.
table and put it at the lower end of your scale. Because while money is important,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, and money can be the make or break in terms of whether or not you take something, give yourself the opportunity to really determine what it is you like and explore and talk with people about what those jobs are all about. Unfortunately, too many companies are not yet posting what those salary ranges are or sharing what those salary ranges are. So by making money the top criteria, I think you lose out. One of the things we've also found out in this job market right now is that if companies really like you, sometimes they may, I'm not going to say everybody, but I've had 3 or 4 people within the last several months who've been able to go in with a job that was at a lower level, okay, as they started the interview process, and the job was redesigned for them. It also
Mm-hmm.
meant the salary was redesigned. And if they only use that salary, initial salary offering as a criteria as to whether or not to do the interview, they would have lost out on a great opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. I have heard of that too. I've heard of that too. And since you have that recruiting and, HR background, I'd like to have you talk a little bit about the idea of things being negotiable, because everything is kind of negotiable, right?
It is. We're finding that I shouldn't say everything. There are some things that aren't.
Hmm.
So, for example, benefits normally aren't.
Yeah,
That's company policy.
right.
Unfortunately, has it started to extend to time off is also in that bucket of things that may or may not be negotiable.
Hmm.
But salary often is. And the ability to get maybe a sign on bonus in this economy is there too.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's even the idea of what particular work, what projects you're going to be starting with is often negotiable. But the idea of being able to say, here's what I bring, what can you do, works.
It's all about knowing your value and knowing what you have to offer the employer. If you are going to be able to take them to the next level, or do something. Now, for example, I've worked with clients, senior executives, and one of the things they often have to do is to, maybe they're starting a new department and they have to build that out, or they're just, with their company having problems and they have to, build out the team. And now some people will they get recruiters, they hire the recruiters, they get the recruiters and staff and whatever. And some of them actually go out and steal people from their competition. They go out and they go to people that they used to work with and bring them in. They're very strategic and proactive about it. And somebody that is like that and can share, it makes all the difference, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so one of the things that's great about LinkedIn is trying to find some of those other people who used to work there, because it's not necessarily that they're going to send your resume in and say hire this person, but having those conversations about what this individual is really looking for, how they work, what their value points are, helps you to get your foot in the door in those conversations.
And can you share a little bit about the idea of engaging with people at a company where you want to work, and who might want to start engaging with on LinkedIn, and how maybe people can go about that?
Sure. So a lot of people think that the first people you should engage with would be HR. And HR is not a bad thing to do, but it may or may not help you in the long run. HR knows a lot about how the company works, and HR will often connect with you, but may
Hmm.
not necessarily engage. What I would do instead would be to try and find people on LinkedIn who are doing what you want to do in that company, or the next level up or down, or
Hmm.
people in other departments with whom this department might interact, and start commenting on their posts, connecting with them. It's not enough just to connect. It's important to really comment on what's going on, and commenting meaning move the conversation forward. one of the things that we found is that those comments where you move the conversation forward help to make you the expert. And if you're commenting on company related posts, you're liking that company, following that company, you then become a known name so that when your name comes across the boards, they already know you. In fact, I had one client who was talking to in an interview, and the CEO said to him, "I've been reading some of your posts online. You're exactly the kind of person we want."
Yeah, thank you so much for that example. Because it is so true. And so many, we hear that phrase, "Oh, it's not what you know, it's who you know," and it's really who knows you. I mean, I'm not the first to say that. I'm not the only to say that, but that is really the truth. It's who is going to think of you when a job opens, or if and so you have to think about that. So I just want to, because you mentioned Sue. So I love that Sue says that she loves that you always remind people about transferable skills. It's a concept that mentees I work with still have trouble actually applying themselves. And I hope you'll give us an example. Okay. And I think we did. I think we gave them a couple of examples of that. And so thank you for being here, joining us, Sue. And here we have EPAC. I'm sorry, I'm probably not pronouncing your name correctly. It says the biggest advice to mold into the expectations, what the hiring people could value difference and originality. It must be the time to think outside the box. And I like the idea that she brought up the idea of expectations, and I'd like to ask you, because I think that's one thing sometimes people don't do when they're looking for a new job, and particularly if they're changing careers, to manage their expectations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You mean if I'm the candidate looking for jobs, what are the
Yeah, that you have to if I'm looking for a job, I may, in fact, if I'm changing careers, I may have to take a position a step down. Maybe not. Maybe my transferable skills would just move right along. And I think there's different ways to transition. For example, when I was working at the magazine, there was someone there that I worked with. She was an admin for the owners of the company, the publishers. But there were a few different magazines owned by the company. When someone was out on vacation, she would go to that magazine and say, "Oh, I can help you. I can fill in. I can write for you." And you know what? When one of the magazines had an opening, who was hired? Her, of course. But so I think that going in and kind of working your way in might be a way to do that. But, what's your take on that and the whole idea of, if I'm changing careers, to think about things that, may go right and may go wrong?
And
I
that's
know it's a big question, but
no, that's okay. And it's a great point, Sue. I mean, that because when we're talking transferable skills, people aren't going to know that those skills are transferable unless you tell them and unless you show them. So the whole idea of being able to put yourself in their shoes, what works for them, is really important. And that's the job of the job seeker, not the company.
yeah.
So and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, EPAC, when she was talking about training the HR to think outside the box, to some extent, it's training the job seeker to think outside the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the idea of how do you present yourself in a way that works for them.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And I think that example from my own life, when I was saying, like, I would say, well, I have this experience writing, so I know I'll be able to, adapt and do the reports easily, to connect the dots for them.
Right. And it's not just saying that I know I can do this. Give them an example of how you did it someplace else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And how you would be able to move from that skill that you have elsewhere to what you're doing here. So immediately when I start working here, if I'm coming in from a different industry, actually that's an asset. It's not a disadvantage that I don't have experience in this industry. It's an asset because I come in bringing my best experience, the best of what works, and I learn from you the things that are important to you. I don't come in with preconceived notions and preconceived ideas. So you're getting the best of both worlds.
Wow, that's great. I haven't heard that before. So yeah, it's and one of the things too, I think, and you did mention this earlier, that people, if they're looking for a job, they go in with the idea that I'm selling myself to the employer, and they have to remember that it's a two-way street. That it's not just them. That the employer, they have to make sure that the employer is a good fit for them as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely true. You spend an awful lot of your time and energy and yourself, you invest yourself in this career. It's terrible to be miserable. And we know that there are times when the job doesn't work out in spite of your best efforts. But do whatever you can up front to make sure that this is the right fit, the right match for you.
Yeah, yeah. So we're getting down to the end of our time together. It goes by so
It
quickly.
does.
And so I'd like you to share, because you talked a little bit about how you worked in HR and recruiting, and then you worked with people in transition, and so that kind of led you into the coaching. But can you share maybe a couple of things, or one really important thing that you think anyone listening to this would be important for them to hear that we haven't already discussed?
Remember that one of the most important things in this career transition area is that the people you're talking with, whether they're your networking people, whether the comments you're making, whether it's the people you're interviewing with at any level, they're people too. And one of the things that's most important is not just sharing those skills, those ways you can help, but sharing yourself. Because we don't hire a piece of paper, we don't interview a piece of paper. We hire and interview the person we want to spend time with who can do the job.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to wind down here. So, where can people find you? Are you open to connecting with people on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. If I can figure out where to put the comment here.
We can't comment from the studio.
Oh, never mind.
We can put your LinkedIn in the comments.
Yes, please. So absolutely. Tell me that you saw us on this program. I'd be happy to connect with you. And absolutely. It's also Linda Brubaker Coach at gmail.com.
Okay. Well, I thank you so much for your time. You have shared a lot of gems here that I know will help people in their job search, and I really appreciate it. I'm always so grateful when people say yes and join me on the show. It's so much fun, and I always learn something, and I know people in the audience learn as well. So thank you, everyone who has been here with us. We've had a few people with us from the beginning. And everyone else, have a great rest of your day. I will not be here next week because I'm going to be in Colorado speaking at a conference. So I'm excited about that.
That's
and thank you so much, Linda. I really, really appreciate your time. And we'll talk soon.
Wonderful. Thank you. I've enjoyed this.